what? Am I open for Everlast?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. It is New York Dolls Week here on the channel. Every week here, we cover a different artist. We rank all of their studio albums, give you our top 10 favorite songs the following day, and we also have a third discussion on Thursdays. But first things first, we're going to rank all of the studio albums. New York Dolls are an interesting one because they've got 5 studio albums, but they've got a huge gap between them. First 2 records came out in the early to mid 70s. Then they took 32 years off or something like that, and then came out with 3 more reunion era albums with just 2 of the original members. So kind of a weird, disjointed sort of discography, but how much did you guys know going into it?
Well, Jason, I knew the first 2 and the comeback album. And I specifically remember seeing propaganda and stuff for the comeback album at like a Virgin Records or a Tower Records, like a lot of stuff. It's like a big deal, apparently, at least in these storefronts. But my real introduction to New York Dolls was the documentary about Arthur Kane. I hadn't really even heard of the New York Dolls before that, but pretty good movie. I mean, there's only 5 albums, and I knew 3 of them, so I covered the other 2.
The first album, that's it. I didn't want to know anymore. That was enough. I didn't even know they got back together. I had no idea. So I'm basically a newbie to the New York Dolls, other than that first 1 album. So this was interesting. It was not great, but it was interesting.
So I knew the first one, obviously. My boy Todd produced it. I know I also listened to like their 20th Century Masters greatest hits at least once. So probably heard a good portion of the second record as well, even though I never listened to it in full. I also listened to the first 2 of the 3 reunion albums when those came out in 06 and 09. So the only ones I didn't know were the last one and the second one. Interesting New York Dolls story before we get started. A band I was in Pittsburgh had a little bit of an in with a local promoter who would hook us up with opening gigs for some national touring acts. That's how I got to play with open for Neon Trees and Sloan and oddly Jimmy's Chicken Shack. But one day got a call saying, "Hey, you're going to open for the New York Dolls." And I was like, "Oh, sweet." The next day I got a call, said their management listened to you and they said no. So it got yanked away from me. But darn, what could have been?
Yeah, you blew it. You blew it big time, dude.
If it's any consolation, whatever you sounded like then, you were better than the New York Dolls at that time. So take that to the bank.
Man, you've almost opened for a lot of people. I believe we almost opened for like Everlast or Everclear that one time. Grisnick was like, "Hey, we can open for them." I was like, "What? I open for Everlast?"
I don't remember that, but I don't doubt it.
I'm going to go first. I don't know if I'm going to be the one to like New York Dolls the most. I think that would probably be the guess, but we'll see. However, they do have an album that I don't like at all, and it was almost sub 2 stars, but I'll keep it at 2. I've got One Day It Will Please Us to Remember from 2006, or One Day It Will Please Us to Remember Even This, but I'm not pleased to remember this. It's not a very good album. We're All in Love is a decent little opener. I know this one got pretty good to decent reviews, but I honestly think it was just people just like happy they were back. It was in the dying days of CD and record purchasing in the mid 2000s. So I think like a lot of people just didn't want to give negative reviews to it. I don't know. I have never thought it was good. It is way too slick for them. The guitars are like too heavy without anything interesting going on. It really just seems like they are a band that's influenced by old New York Doll stuff. it just doesn't seem right. The recording and sound of the 70s albums works, but right now it's just not ugly enough to kind of like do them. It just sounds so bland and just generic. It's kind of stiff and clenched as well. There's no like fun or partying or anything on it. Everything just seems so calculated and meticulous, which is like the complete opposite of what you want from New York Dolls. Everything's played kind of heavy handed. The songs are stretched out too long. It even comes out as pretty cheesy and corny, of just like old dudes rocking out with like a song like Dance Like a Monkey. That's no good. Though I do think Johansen sounds good almost all the time, and he's a very underrated frontman. But his voice in this mix is dominating everything, and nothing in the background comes out. And everything in the background is just one wall of noise. Like you can't tell what's happening, and probably for the best. I don't know, it's just very boring and basic. And I know New York Dolls loyalists and faithful are going to be, we get this criticism all the time. What do you expect from older guys doing this? And it's like, well, I expect a 2-star album, which is what I get. So, we don't grade on a curve. A 1-year-old can't release an album and me go, it's a 5-star experimental masterpiece. So it is what it is. It's a bad album, but it gets better after this. I think the better tracks on it are the opener, Gimme Love and Turn on the Light. That's about it.
All right. Well, it is also my bottom. I have One Day It Will Please Us to Remember Even This. This one's produced by Jack Douglas, who, big rock producer, big name. He was the engineer on the debut while Todd was producing. So he does have a past connection to the band. I, however, don't think that this record is as bad as Cram does. I actually think it's pretty decent. I mean, it's really straightforward rock record. It does, I think, a pretty good job of capturing the feel of the Dolls. All things considered, 32 years since the last record, only 2 original members left. Like Cram, I do wish the album was a little dirtier and the playing was a little looser. It does sound a little too modern. I think the record's best moments actually are when they get a little bit further away from what the actual sound of the band used to be. There's some tracks here where they dabble in almost like country or Americana, and I think some of that stuff is really cool. Plenty of Music, I think, is a great song, has a really good melody. Maimed Happiness, one of those tracks that's a little country-esque, I think shows off some pretty mature songwriting. There's some really cool guest appearances too. Michael Stipe on Dancing on the Lip of a Volcano. Laura Jane Grace is on 2 tracks. Iggy Pop shows up. Bo Diddley is on a bonus track. I don't know. I think it's kind of a cool celebration of the fact that the 2 of them are still able to make music together, and the legacy that they created together. So it's all right. I got it 3.5 stars. Overall, I think it's good.
I always gave Cramser a standing ovation for his review because it's a lousy album, ladies and gentlemen. One Day It Will Please Us to Remember Even This. Real awkward. It just sounds like a band clinging to past glories. It sounds old. I mean, right off the bat, they just sound old. And I'm not just saying that because I think they sound better on the tracks or on the albums that come later. So there's something just didn't work at all with this album. Definitely the worst they sound, definitely stiff, stilted. I was looking at the reviews before I even listened to it. I was like, wow, Robert Christgau named it the best album of the year. It's like, this must be one hell of a comeback, but it's kind of embarrassing. Gotta Get Away from Tommy is just one of the worst songs I think I've ever heard. Reminds me of like Blondie when they came back and got like really kind of like icky a little bit. The only thing I really liked was like picking out the guest stars, the backing vocals from Laura Jane Grace, Iggy Pop, Michael Stipe. Other than that, I mean, there's just nothing on here that lives up to, the debut, the second album, the albums that came after it. So I have it at 2 stars, and that's probably generous because it's real bad. Stay away from this one.
Good call, my friend. But Joe might carry the negativity forward, but I won't. I'm going up to 3 stars. A good album from number 4, which is their 2011 release, Dancing Backward in High Heels. Jason was kind of talking about some of the more country Americana stuff that was kind of oozing in during their, second era, which happens more on Because Said So. And then this one could have probably followed that up. And there's maybe a little bit of in here, but this one, they kind of do these cool little like old school golden pop era kind of throwbacks, which I really kind of dig. I think Full for You Baby is really catchy, really pretty actually. There's almost like some old dream pop with like old backing oohs and ahs and more reverb and lighter guitars than ever. Old school pop charm. Talk to Me Baby with the backing vocals I really adore. You Don't Have to Cry. The album is probably their thinnest sounding, but I like the direction. I do think it's a little bit too soft and light at times, like the cover of I Sold My Heart to the Junkman. But End of the Summer is cool. Yeah, I think they do a lot of interesting things. I think it's short and sweet to the point. It's under 40 minutes and just a good little record. So my number 4, Dancing Backward in High Heels, 3 stars.
All right. That is also my number 4. I'm staying at 3.5 stars. This one's produced by Jason Hill. He also joins the band on bass for this record. Jason Hill's a cool guy. He was in a really cool band called Convoy, and they made a great record called Black Licorice. If you're interested in checking it out, I love that record. But then later, after Convoy broke up, he became better known as a member of Louis XVI, which kind of made him like a torchbearer for glam in the 21st century, I'd say. So he's here, and I think he's bringing that glammier aspect back to the band. You also get former Blondie guitarist Frank Infante joining the band. Some of the record doesn't sound entirely different from the first 2 reunion albums, but there are certain tracks like Talk to Me Baby that have way more of that Jason Hill touch to them, that just that like kind of like sparkly, modern, glammy sound. I really enjoy those songs and what he's bringing to them. It's interesting to hear them go for kind of a more modern sound with someone like Hill, who really also understands the band and, isn't totally bastardizing their sound by kind of modernizing it. He kind of finds the right balance. I love the cover of I Sold My Heart to the Junkman. I also like Funky But Chic, which is a really cool disco tune, which I think they revived from a early David Johansen solo record. However, I do think there is a little bit of a short supply of melodies on this record. I think it's a little bit of a trade-off like between songs and production. Like this record, I think easily has better production than my number 5. Someday It Will Please Us, but I think the songs are actually better on that record, or at least there's more good songs on that record. I think all of the reunion albums are pretty close in quality. So 3.5 stars for this one as well.
Right. I'm going to break the little love fest we got going on here with the trifectas. I'm going to go with Because I Says So for my number 4. This one was produced by Todd Rundgren. So, of course, Jason has to have it a little bit higher. And it sounds better. It definitely sounds better than the first comeback album. Almost to the point where it's like garage rocky, not really that kind of punk, not that glam, little touches of like alternative even in there. But it's also like really positive and upbeat in a lot of songs, which is kind of cool. Like it just kind of has a different feel than the first comeback, where it's sort of like we're trying to rehash old glories. This, they kind of sound like they're pushing forward a little bit. So it's a cool sounding album. Obviously, Todd Rundgren does a good job with production. I don't know if any of these tracks really stand out, but there was none that I was like cringing over, like I was many times on the One Day It Will Please Us. There's nothing like Dance Like a Monkey or Get Away from Tommy. The worst track's probably the kind of pointless reggae rehash of Trash, which just didn't need to be done. But it's a good song, but I don't know, reggae doesn't do whole much for me. I have this at 3 stars, but it's not something I'm going to come back to. But it's not embarrassing, so it's a step up in the right direction.
All right. Number 3 is Too Much Too Soon. So my top two are the Todd albums because I am actually the bigger appreciator of Todd. 3.5 for this though. It's really good. I just we do a lot of discographies where I feel like someone catches lightning in a bottle and knocks it out of the park, and then kind of follows it up with the same thing diet version. This one is pretty similar to the debut, just not quite as good. Like we were talking about, for me, a few weeks ago we were talking about Tom Waits, and it's kind of the same thing with the follow-up to Closing Time. And I don't like Rain Dogs as much as Swordfish Trombones. This kind of is the same flavor. I don't think getting rid of Todd was the right move. One thing that's maybe better on this album is the drumming. A little more rockin', a little more interesting, especially like on Babylon. Stranded in the Jungle is really cool with the break when he goes meanwhile back in the States. I love that. And then it kicks back in with that 50s blues jangle, really cool. Still really like this album. Bit more humor and joy here, maybe a little bit. I like the original one because it's a little bit sloppier, nastier, grimier. Like the really soft, perky backing vocals on Mystery Girls. I'm not sure. It's Too Late is probably my highlight on it. Puss in Boots is awesome as well. Chatterbox is very cool, written by Thunders, actually. But like Bad Detective, a little bit too playhousey for me. I really dig the harmonica and Don't Start Me Talking. So I think everything's really good, just not nearly as memorable as the debut. So I've got this at number 3, Too Much Too Soon, 3.5 stars, which is kind of aptly named because it's just like, hold on, figure out way to evolve from the debut a little bit. I don't know. That's just how I hear it. Long live Todd.
Yeah, long live Todd, but I do have Cause I Says So at my number 3, 3.5 stars as well. They had some great mature ballads, I think, on the first reunion record, and I think those were the highlights of that record. But here they get the rock songs working a little bit better too. I think Cause I Says So, the title track, is really convincing hard rocker, and I think it would be even more so if it wasn't for the kind of fat, slightly muddy low end. But I think Todd always really seems to make sure that the artists have good songs, and no exception here. I think probably the best batch of songs of the 3 reunion records, easily. I like Better Than You a lot. Lonely So Long is really cool. Both are really strong melodic songs, very memorable. They get into the blues a little bit on This Is Ridiculous, and they got a little touch of spaghetti western on Temptation to Exist. Making Rain sounds so much like a Pete Townsend song. It's crazy. And then, I think this record just has more consistently good songs than the predecessor. It's also a little rougher and scrappier around the edges, which is a good thing. Like, I think the first one with Jack Douglas was a little too polished, a little too clean, a little too like Pro Toolsy, quantized sounding. This one sounds like a rock band. It's a little rougher, and I think that was the right way to go. Pretty good record, 3.5 stars.
All right, I'm gonna go with Dancing Backwards in High Heels for my number 3. I do like that they're kind of expanding their sound. It's almost like early 60s Beach Boys, like surf rock to start off the album, which is shocking to me. Street Cake, Talk to Me Baby. The cover of I Sold My Heart to the Junk Man has like a doo-wop feel to it, funky but chic, cool disco. So that kind of intrigued me. The other songs kind of, similar to the last 2 of the comeback albums. It doesn't sound quite as good as the Todd Rundgren ones. Like some of those Beach Boys-y backing vocals on Fool for You Baby are like a little like too synthesized, kind of cheesy sounding. I feel like Todd would have found a better way to get those in there. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of cute, kind of older guys rocking it up a little bit, but also kind of dipping back to the past for like a new sound. So I appreciate that they tried that. It's like it's close to 3.5. What the hell? I'll give them three stars. They haven't earned it. 3 stars.
My number 2 is the Todd Rundgren produced "'Cause I Says So." Almost 4 stars for me. I thought this was a pleasant surprise, an album I'd never heard before or I really knew of. Yeah, the lead off track is excellent. Guitars roaring and riffing more and sticking out more. Muddy Bones is good. The bass is ripping on that one. I wonder why this one sounds so much better than the first comeback album, because Todd just makes sure, like Jason said, that the songs are good and brings them all to life. Like the songs on the '06 album are just so flat and nothing is like brought to life. There's no amplification of any sort of instrument or like momentous occasion in the songs. They all just kind of start, take up 4 or 5 minutes, and then end. But this one, there's a lot more attention to detail going on. It's really impressive. And in fact, you don't really know much about production or what the producer's role is. This is a great example of just to show you what a good producer can do from the '06 album to this one. Better Than You is really quirky and sincere. Lonely So Long is really great. Love the Bum a Cigarette, Nobody Smokes No More line. Very cool, New York Dollsy. Sounds so sad when he does it too, like that old like Charlie Brown bummed out, like Slow Walk, like no one smokes anymore. Wah, 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 wah. I think the quality of Temptation to Exist is directly attributed to Todd and marks the vast difference. Drowning is really, really good song. Yeah, I think it's close to 4. And just Todd makes all the difference for me with this band. So he is the doll maker, the doll master.
My number 2 is Too Much, Too Soon from 1974, the sophomore record. After the debut, the band was, they expressed some dissatisfaction with Todd, especially his mix. So they get a new producer, Shadow Morton. And this record does sound better, I think, in most ways, but I think the drum sound isn't great and not a really great sound for the Dolls specifically. They really sound like dead, almost like pillows, kind of drum sound that I love, but I think it works better for pop stuff and singer-songwriter stuff. It's kind of like that, almost like Ringo drum sound. But for a band that's trying to like come at you with some energy, like the Dolls, I think it's kind of stifling almost. But other than that, I think the guitars and the vocals and everything else is produced really well. The backing vocals sound great on this record. They do a bunch of covers on this, and I think the original material was mostly pulled from like older demos. They didn't really write a lot of new songs for this record, and I think that shows a little bit. I think that the quality of the songs here isn't nearly up to the level it was on the debut, but I still think it's a really cool record, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening. Some of the covers are great. Stranded in the Jungle, love it. Love the production on that one. The female backing vocals are awesome. Reminds me of like what Mott the Hoople was doing around the time. In fact, the Dolls had opened for Mott on their US tour, so I think some of that may have rubbed off. Another thing, along with the better production, I think they are becoming better players here, and I think it's noticeable. The playing's a lot tighter on this record than it is on the first, not quite as shambolic. But I do think also, maybe because of the covers and the choice of covers, they're coming across a little more cartoony here and a little less street tough, which is fine. I mean, rock and roll should be fun, and I think that it's meant to be a fun record. It's just an observation that it's a little more like like they're playing characters of themselves or something, rather than these like tough like street urchin type of dudes. Johnny Thunders sings lead on Chatterbox. He's got a much higher voice than David Johansen. It's kind of a cool change up. Yeah, just a really fun, cool rock and roll record. I think it's well produced. There's some fun choices of cover songs. 4 stars for me. I think it's really good. Just not quite as good as the first.
Well, I'm gonna have to disagree with about everything you said there, except for the drum sounds. You're right. Drum sounds wimpy. Guitars sound wimpy. Everything sounds wimpy on this album, and that, for me, just totally kills it. Totally takes me out of that like raucous, raunchy, like just we're from the street, we're breaking bottles, we're, a great live stage act that you get on that first album. Whatever Todd did, I'm not a producer, but he let them like be themselves. And I think on this one, like they kind of turn into cartoons. Stranded in the Jungle, I hate. I think it's super lame. Babylon, pretty good lead off track, but like as soon as you hear it, you're like, something's missing here. Like that edge is gone. And that, like, I just don't think they're good enough, like, at anything to be like kind of muted a little bit and kind of, you know, just kind of toned down too much. I don't think the production from Shadow Morton is very good because just I mean, listening to them back to back, it's like a completely different band, a completely different everything. So it just took all of the air out of it for me. I do think the covers are pretty good. There's going to be a showdown, pretty good raw sounding on that one, but it's a cover. Bad Detective is awful. I like there's some saxophone on Human Being, and it kind of adds to the messiness and kind of gets back a little bit to the first album where it's just like anything can happen, like just stuff breaking and harmonicas and sax. And on this one, it just sounds a little too like formulated and planned out. So you're missing that dirtiness, a little too like herky jerky and like trying to like do stuff. It's just like, I want the natural, raw, rock and dirty sound that you get on the first one. So I was pretty disappointed in this one. Still at 3 stars.
Well, we do have a trifecta, though the enthusiasm levels may be different. New York Dolls, the debut, 4.5 from me. I can't quite get it to 5. It's not one of my all-time favorite albums, but I do really, really like it. In fact, I really, really love it. Personality Crisis is awesome. Love the fire and the fury and the vocals. Great guitar solo and piano. Love the friend of a friend of a friend part. And Joe's right. The brilliance of Todd, who's usually a master of detail and stuff, is like, the beauty of this is just like him coming in being like, whatever you're doing on stage, just do it again. We're going to record it. Like, I don't care if you're drunk. I don't care if you mess up. I don't care if you're sloppy. That's what makes you guys great. You're completely unneutered. Let's do it. It's got a terrific live room sound feel. You know, you can hear the influence of so many bands to come after this because of this album. It's huge. Lonely Planet Boy is great, sweet and innocent sounding, but in their own way. I love the disdain and like self-defense in the lyrics on this album. Like Drunken Boy Doesn't Need Girl kind of love songs. Very cool. Frankenstein is great. Tremendous pulse. I think Trash is awesome. It's like oddly melodic and kind of pretty. You can just hear, like listening to this song, like young Paul Westerberg or Frank Black just being like this, getting in their DNA. It's awesome. Subway Train, Aerosmith coming at you a few years later, big time. It's awesome. It's one of the most influential records ever, I think. You know, this style isn't always my favorite, but I can appreciate its greatness so much, and I really love listening to it. I wish I could go 5, but my heart just says it's not quite 5 stars. I mean, in the hierarchy of objective influence on rock, sure, yeah, it's monumental. It's a pillar. But it's just not one of my most favorite albums. I really do love it, though. 4.5. There you go.
Well, obviously my number 1 as well. I also have it at 4.5 stars, produced by Todd Rundgren, engineered by Jack Douglas. The first time I ever heard the New York Dolls was on a compilation of songs produced by Todd Rundgren called An LP's Worth of Productions. Just mind-blowing how early this is, in 1973, well before the punk thing really started. Like you said, just hugely influential to so much of that music. It's loose, it's scrappy, it's trashy, tons of attitude, tons of personality, and just enough actual ability to get the songs across. Always seems like it's about to go off the rails at any second, like so much of the best rock and roll does. Great guitar interplay between the two guitarists, Sylvain Sylvain and Johnny Thunders, just awesome the way they bounce off of each other. David Johansen sounds possessed, he's so charismatic. Love like the little spoken word bit at the beginning of Looking for a Kiss, just so cool. Gives them so much personality. But then you also get like some more sensitive and nuanced tunes like Lonely Planet Boy with the acoustic guitars and saxophone. the restrained vocal delivery. I love that track. I think it's awesome. Trash is great. Shows some of their 60s pop influence, maybe a little bit of Beach Boys, a little bit of girl group type of stuff creeping into the backing vocals. Some great guitar tones all over the record. I think the best one, probably on Bad Girl. I love the sound of the guitar on that track. And then, Rundgren, I don't know, when you think of like great producers and you talk about like what great producers do, you normally the conversation centers around sound and like a producer having a sound, like a Mutt Lange or something, where you get those big, huge, like 15 tracks of vocals coming at you, or I don't know, like T-Bone Burnett, or who has a very specific sound. I never really felt like Todd had that much of a sound. Occasionally he does, like on the Cheap Trick record that he produced, it sounds very much like Utopia. But some of the records that he produced are like, is Todd even part of this? Like, it's interesting how he works. Like sometimes when he has to, he'll make it sound a certain way, but a lot of times he seems like fairly hands off. And he also in the early years had this real reputation for working with bands that like just couldn't get it together. Like with Badfinger, they had worked with 2 producers and fired them. They're like, okay, Todd's going to go in, he's going to get it done in a week. And that was kind of the way he operated. He was just like, let's do it, let's go in, let's not mess around. And I feel like more than anything, that was his role on this record. Like, we've got limited time here. This band is just like a group of weirdos, and like you need to go in and wrangle them and get it on tape. And I think he did. And I think that's why it comes across so scrappy. It's just quick, let's bang it out, let's not mess around. And it works. And there are stories of him like going in the drum booth and like banging on a cowbell to make him play in time. So I guess he was like kind of like pushing them around a bit in the studio, but whatever he did, it works and it's great.
Influence wise, obviously it's a 5-star album. New York Dolls, the debut, a lot of fun. Definitely taking sort of the Stones' version of rock and roll, making it even more youthful, adolescence. It's like drunk boy meets girl, a bunch of like bratty lyrics. The guitar sounds, it's glammy, but it's like faster and rawer. And I guess that comes from, not being as good. Obviously these as players, they're not as good as the legends that we talk about all the time. But I think that works in their favor here, because you can't really get to like punk from like that really sharp kind of overdone, world of rock and roll that things were kind of moving towards the progressive sound. Like this is sort of like a left turn, at Exile on Main Street or something, where it's just this whole new world of kind of raw, bratty energy. And, I know the first time I heard this album, I was just like, not for me. I don't dig this. It just doesn't have enough, doesn't have enough shine to it, probably is what I thought. But it has won me over, and I do like it a lot. And I think you need a lot of listens at very loud volumes to really get this one. I do have it at 4.5 stars, like y'all. Can't get to 5, but there's some great tracks on here. Frankenstein is just an absolute monster. Such a powerful track. Those shaky, kind of quaking vocals, the way it builds. Johansen just like on the edge of sanity towards the end there. And the guitar, for like not being the greatest players, like it's pretty darn catchy and good. Like some of those big the big riffs, the big bends, like slides all over the place, like they're really just like charging forward, and you just get caught up in it. It's almost like metal at sometimes, and almost Sex Pistols, The Clash at other times. You definitely see a lot of like Kiss, but you can also see like The Clash and like punk as well in a lot of this. So it's it's just a really kind of cool, unique, Kramser said it, lightning in the bottle kind of thing, where like all the things that normally would be against a rock and roll band, like not being great at playing or singing or doing any of these things, totally works in their favor. And I don't know if Todd just sort of like duct taped it all together and just like got it out there, but I think it really catches like, obviously I've never seen the New York Dolls like live at this time, but I think it's as close and as good as you can get to like having that like live raucous sound on an album. Like anything cleaner, anything smoother than this, I think would have just sucked out all the energy, sapped them of what they do best, which was apparently these great live shows, which inspired everybody and made them the toast of New York. And this one didn't sell very well. I think it only made it to like 150 on the charts. So one of those albums that had a huge oversized influence despite not being very popular, but I think people now today see it as it is and how it should be. So it's a really great album, 4.5 stars, a lot of fun.
So final thoughts on the New York Dolls. I enjoyed the week. I didn't go below good. I have everything at 3.5 or up. Yeah, I like all of their records. Obviously, the first two are better than the other three, but good week for me.
I just listened to that debut over and over. I pretty much did. Like I went through them all, and I was like, I'm just gonna listen to the debut for like 5 or 6 more times, and then maybe I'll get into some of the other stuff. But it's gonna be a clean sweep as far as for the most part. There's only 11 tracks, so it could be a clean sweep on the favorite songs. Find out tomorrow.
For me, because I said so, more appreciation for Todd. I mean, I already knew the debut, and I always kind of considered them a one album band. And even though I like some of the other albums a lot, like, it's all about one album for them and hugely influential. It's one of the most influential albums ever. So, doing those kind of artists isn't always my favorite. It's a huge album. Didn't get nominated the year it came out. Not a top 100 artist for me, but it's always good to throw that album on every couple of years and get down in the drunken pit with that. So yeah, it's cool.
All right. So let us know what you think of the New York Dolls. Drop your list and how you rank them down in the comments. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Hit the bell for notifications. You can find Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our website, merch, and Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. Links to all of that stuff is in the video description. Check it out. And we'll see you tomorrow for our top 10 favorite New York Dolls songs. Thanks for watching.